Jonathan's hand cracked across Catherine's face with such force that she stumbled backward into the marble credenza, sending a crystal vase crashing to the floor. Victoria Croft stood in the doorway of the drawing room, wineglass in hand, her perfectly painted lips curling into a smile that could only be described as delighted. She took a slow sip, savoring both the vintage and the violence unfolding before her like a private performance staged for her entertainment. Catherine pressed her fingers to her bleeding lip, tasting copper and humiliation in equal measure, while Jonathan flexed his reddened knuckles and turned to Victoria with a grin that made Catherine's stomach turn. This was the moment everything shattered beyond repair. Before we continue with Catherine's story, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Stay with me until the very end, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Comment below with the city you're watching from so I can see just how far Catherine's story has traveled around the world. The evening had started 3 hours earlier with the kind of false civility that had become Catherine's daily uniform. She'd dressed carefully in a navy silk dress that Jonathan had approved that morning, applied makeup to cover the fingerprint bruises on her upper arm, and descended the curved staircase of Greygate with the practiced grace of a woman who'd learned that survival meant performance. The potential investor Richard Henley was due at 7:30, and Jonathan had been explicit about her role. Smile, be charming, don't speak unless spoken to, pour the wine, look beautiful, make him believe we're the perfect couple. Catherine had nodded through each instruction, her eyes fixed on a point just past Jonathan's shoulder, a trick she'd developed to endure his briefings without actually looking at him. Looking at him meant seeing the man she'd married 6 years ago and confronting the devastating reality that that man had never actually existed. The Jonathan Sterling she'd fallen in love with had been a carefully constructed illusion, a mask he'd worn just long enough to slip a 5-carat diamond on her finger and gain access to her father's empire. She'd moved through the kitchen, checking on the meal preparation, her heels clicking against the Italian tile with metronomic precision. The staff had learned to read her moods by the set of her shoulders and the tightness around her eyes, and tonight they moved with extra efficiency, nobody wanting to give Jonathan any excuse to find fault. Maria, the housekeeper who'd been with Catherine since before the marriage, caught her hand as she passed. "Senora, you don't have to do this." Catherine had squeezed Maria's hand briefly warmly, then released it. "Yes, I do." Because what choice did she have? Jonathan controlled the bank accounts. He'd systematically alienated her from every friend she'd ever had, with a campaign of subtle poison delivered at dinner parties and charity events. Poor Catherine's so paranoid lately. Catherine's been struggling with her nerves, you understand. I'm worried about her stability, if I'm being honest. He'd taken her car keys, her credit cards, even her phone, replacing it with one he monitored constantly. He knew where she was every moment of every day. When she'd tried to call her father 6 months ago, Jonathan had ripped the phone from her hand and backhanded her so hard she'd seen stars. Then he'd made her apologize for being sneaky, for betraying his trust, for making him hurt her. The investor had arrived precisely on time, a silver-haired man in his late 60s with kind eyes and an easy laugh. Catherine had greeted him at the door with her public smile, the one that never reached her eyes anymore, but looked convincing enough in the right lighting. She'd taken his coat, offered him a drink, and guided him to the drawing room where Jonathan waited already 2 bourbons deep and wearing his most charismatic expression. What Catherine hadn't expected was Victoria. She'd emerged from Jonathan's study at 7:45, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent and an expression of territorial satisfaction that made her intentions crystal clear. Catherine's hand had tremored slightly as she poured Richard Henley's wine, white-knuckling the bottle to keep it steady. Jonathan noticed. He always noticed. His eyes had flicked to her shaking hand, then to her face, and she'd seen the promise there. "You'll pay for that later." "Richard, I don't believe you've met Victoria Croft," Jonathan had said smoothly, rising to guide Victoria to the seat directly across from Catherine. "Victoria's been invaluable to our marketing expansion. Absolutely invaluable. I honestly don't know what I'd do without her." The subtext was sledgehammer subtle. Victoria was essential. Catherine was not. Victoria had extended her hand to Richard with a smile that was all teeth and ambition. "Jonathan's too kind, although I do pride myself on knowing exactly what he needs and when he needs it." She'd let that hang in the air like poison gas while Catherine sat frozen in her chair, the wine bottle still clutched in her hands like a weapon she didn't have the courage to use. Richard Henley, to his credit, had looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting between Jonathan's possessive hand on Victoria's lower back and Catherine's rigidly expressionless face. Dinner had been a masterclass in psychological torture. Jonathan had seated Victoria to his right, relegating Catherine to the far end of the table like an afterthought. Every story Jonathan told included Victoria. Every joke was directed at Victoria. Every warm look, every smile, every moment of attention flowed to Victoria, while Catherine existed in a gray zone of deliberate invisibility. When Richard had attempted to include Catherine in the conversation, asking politely about her background in art history, Jonathan had interrupted before she could finish her second sentence. Catherine used to be quite involved in the art world, but she's been focusing on home life lately. Haven't you, darling? It wasn't a question. It was a command dressed as casual conversation. Catherine had nodded, set down her fork, and said nothing else for the remainder of the meal. Victoria had watched her with barely concealed amusement, like a cat watching a mouse who'd already accepted its fate. The breaking point had come during dessert. Maria had prepared Catherine's favorite, a lavender creme brulee, something she'd specifically requested that morning as a small kindness to herself. When Maria had set the dessert in front of her, Catherine had felt a tiny flicker of something almost like joy, a reminder that small pleasures still existed even in this prison of a marriage. Jonathan had noticed that flicker. He'd noticed the way her expression softened, the way her shoulders dropped just slightly, and he'd reached across the table, picked up her untouched dessert, and set it in front of Victoria. Victoria has a terrible sweet tooth. He'd said, his eyes locked on Catherine's. You don't mind, do you, Catherine? You're always so generous. Catherine had felt something crack inside her chest, something that had been holding together through sheer force of will. She'd opened her mouth closed. It then heard herself say, Actually, I do mind. The silence that had followed was deafening. Richard Henley had frozen with his spoon halfway to his mouth. Maria, clearing plates in the background, had gone completely still. Victoria had leaned back in her chair with an expression of anticipatory glee, and Jonathan had slowly, deliberately set down his wineglass with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Excuse me. Catherine's heart had been hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat, but she'd forced herself to meet his eyes. I said I mind. Maria made that for me. I'd like to eat it. Jonathan had laughed. Actually laughed. But there was nothing amused in the sound. It was the laugh of a man who'd just been challenged in front of witnesses and was calculating exactly how to reassert dominance. Catherine, you're being rude to our guest. Apologize to Victoria. No. That single syllable had hung in the air like the beginning of an earthquake. Victoria's eyes had widened with something close to ecstasy. Richard Henley had pushed back from the table slightly, his businessman's instincts clearly screaming that he was witnessing something he shouldn't. And Jonathan had stood up his chair, scraping against the hardwood with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. Richard, I apologize for my wife's behavior. She's been under tremendous stress lately, not quite herself. Victoria, perhaps you could show Richard the garden while I have a word with Catherine in private. Richard had opened his mouth as if to protest, but Victoria had already risen her hand on his elbow, guiding him toward the French doors with practiced efficiency. She'd glanced back once, catching Catherine's eye, and the message had been clear. This is your own fault. You should have stayed silent. You should have stayed broken. The moment the door had closed behind them, Jonathan had moved with frightening speed. He'd grabbed Catherine's upper arm, yanking her out of her chair with enough force that she'd stumbled, catching herself on the table edge. His face had been inches from hers, his breath hot and sour with bourbon. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Do you have any concept of how much money that deal is worth? And you decide tonight of all nights to develop a spine. Catherine had tried to pull away, but his grip had only tightened his fingers, digging into the bruises already forming there. Jonathan, you're hurting me. I'm hurting you. He'd laughed again, that same brittle sound. Catherine, I haven't even started. You want to play games? You want to embarrass me in front of a $50 million investor? Let me show you what games look like. He'd dragged her into the drawing room, shoving her hard enough that she'd crashed into the credenza. That's when the vase had fallen, shattering into 1,000 glittering pieces that spread across the floor like crystallized tears. Catherine had scrambled to her feet, her dress torn at the shoulder, her hair falling from its careful updo. She'd backed toward the fireplace looking for an exit, an escape route, anything. But Jonathan had blocked her path, and behind him, Victoria had reappeared in the doorway alone. Richard Henley was nowhere to be seen. Victoria had pulled out her phone, and for one wild moment, Catherine had thought she was calling for help. Then she'd seen the red recording light and realized with dawning horror that Victoria was filming this. "Jonathan, what are you doing?" Catherine had tried to keep her voice steady, tried to sound rational, reasonable. "Victoria's recording us." "I know," Jonathan had said. Let her. Let her record the truth about you. The truth about what a miserable, ungrateful, pathetic excuse for a wife you've become." He'd advanced on her, and Catherine had held up her hands, trying to create distance, trying to make him see reason. Please just let me go upstairs. We can talk about this tomorrow, when you've calmed down." "Calmed down." His voice had risen to a roar. "You think I need to calm down? You think this is about me being upset? This is about you learning your goddamn place in this house." The first slap had come so fast, she hadn't had time to protect her face. Her head had snapped to the side, and she'd tasted blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her cheek. She'd staggered, but managed to stay on her feet, her hand pressed to her burning cheek. In the doorway, Victoria had adjusted her angle to get a better shot, her expression one of rapt fascination. "That's for embarrassing me," Jonathan had said, his voice dropping to something almost conversational. "This is for defying me." The second blow had been harder, a closed fist this time that had caught her on the temple and sent her sprawling. She'd hit the floor hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Through blurred vision, she'd seen her own blood on the marble floor, bright red drops that seemed impossibly vivid against the white stone. She'd heard Victoria laugh, a sound like breaking glass, and whisper, "Oh my God, this is perfect." Catherine had tried to crawl away, her hands slipping in her own blood, but Jonathan had grabbed a fistful of her hair, yanking her head back. "Where do you think you're going? We're not done here. We're nowhere near done." He'd pulled her to her feet, and she'd seen him reach for his belt. The leather had made a sickening whisper as he'd pulled it free from the loops, and Catherine had felt something inside her simply shut down. This was it. This was how she would die. In her own home in a $75 million estate in Greenwich, while her husband's mistress filmed it for posterity. "Jonathan, please." Her voice had come out broken, barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. Please don't do this." But he'd been beyond hearing her. The belt had come down across her shoulders, and the pain had been white-hot, searing. She'd screamed, unable to stop herself, and heard Victoria laugh again. The belt had come down again and again, each strike punctuated by Jonathan's labored breathing and Victoria's encouraging commentary. "That's right, show her who's in charge. God, I love watching you take control like this. She needs to learn, Jonathan. She really needs to learn." Catherine had collapsed her body, unable to take any more, curling into herself on the floor. She'd pressed her face against the cold marble and prayed for unconsciousness, for escape, for anything but this endless nightmare. Blood had soaked through the back of her dress. Her entire back felt like it was on fire. She'd heard Victoria's footsteps approaching, felt the phone camera come closer, capturing her humiliation in high definition. "Look at the camera, Catherine," Victoria had crooned. "Let everyone see what happens to wives who forget their place. Let them see what a pathetic mess you are." Catherine had kept her eyes closed, refusing to give Victoria that satisfaction, and that's when she'd heard it. The front door opening, footsteps in the foyer. A voice that made her heart stop and restart in the same instant. "Catherine? Catherine, where are you?" Her father's voice, William Sterling's voice. Jonathan had frozen mid-strike, the belt still raised. Victoria's phone had wavered, her confident expression flickering into something that might have been uncertainty. Catherine had opened her eyes, turned her head, and seen her father standing in the doorway of the drawing room. For a long moment, nobody had moved. William Sterling had taken in the scene with the comprehensive assessment of a man who'd built a $50 billion empire from nothing. His daughter on the floor bleeding, his son-in-law standing over her with a belt. A strange woman with a phone recording, the broken vase, the blood on the marble, the torn dress, every detail catalogued and processed in the space of a heartbeat. When he'd spoken, his voice had been quiet, deadly quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded corporate executions and boardroom massacres. "Jonathan, put down the belt." Jonathan had lowered his arms slowly, but his face had taken on a defiant cast. "William, this is between me and my wife. This is a private matter." "Private?" William had stepped into the room, and Catherine had seen both Jonathan and Victoria instinctively back up. Her father had that effect on people. He was not a large man, but he carried the kind of authority that made size irrelevant. There's a woman filming my daughter being beaten in my house, and you want to call this private your house." Jonathan had let out a bitter laugh. "I think you mean my house. Catherine and I live here. This is our home." William had smiled then, and it had been terrifying. Catherine had seen that smile before, usually right before someone lost their job, their company, or their entire fortune. "Jonathan, did you actually read the deed to this property? Or did you just assume that because you married my daughter, everything became yours?" The color had drained from Jonathan's face. "What are you talking about? Greygate belongs to the Sterling Family Trust. It was purchased with trust funds and titled in the trust's name. You and Catherine live here at my discretion. That means this is legally and literally my house, and I want you out of it, now." Victoria had edged toward the door, clearly recognizing that her presence had become a liability. But William had turned to her with surgical precision. "And you, give me the phone." "I don't think so," Victoria had said, trying for bravado and landing somewhere around nervous bravado. "This is my personal property, and I have every right to—" "You're standing in my house filming my daughter without her consent in a moment of extreme distress, which in Connecticut constitutes illegal wiretapping. You can hand me that phone voluntarily, or I can have you arrested and let the police seize it as evidence. Your choice. You have 5 seconds to decide." Victoria had looked at Jonathan clearly, hoping for some kind of support or rescue, but Jonathan had been staring at William like a man watching his entire world collapse. She'd thrust the phone at William and fled the room, her heels clicking rapidly toward the front door. They'd heard it slam a moment later. William had pocketed the phone and then finally had knelt beside Catherine. His hand on her shoulder had been gentle, so gentle, and that gentleness had broken something in her that Jonathan's violence couldn't touch. She'd started to cry great heaving sobs that hurt her battered ribs and torn back. "I'm sorry," she'd gasped. "Daddy, I'm so sorry. I didn't want you to see me like this. I didn't want anyone to know." "Shh! We're going to get you to a hospital. Maria—" His voice had carried through the house with commanding clarity. "Call an ambulance now." "That's not necessary." Jonathan had interjected, his voice taking on a pleading quality. "William, we can handle this privately. Catherine's fine, aren't you, Catherine? Tell your father you're fine." William hadn't even looked at him. He'd helped Catherine into a sitting position, supporting her weight, his expensive suit jacket, pressing against her bloody dress, without hesitation. "Jonathan, you are going to leave this house. You're going to go to a hotel. You're going to speak to no one about what happened here tonight. And first thing Monday morning, you're going to receive a call from my attorneys. I suggest you retain counsel immediately." "You can't do this," Jonathan had said. But the protest had sounded hollow even to Catherine's ears. "Catherine is my wife. This is my marriage. You can't just interfere like this." William had finally looked up at him then, and Catherine had felt Jonathan take an involuntary step backward from the cold fury in her father's eyes. "I can do whatever I want. You seem to have forgotten who holds the actual power in this relationship. Your position at Sterling Global gone as of this moment. The discretionary bonuses you've been receiving ended. The country club membership, the car allowance, the expense account, all of it gone. You married my daughter thinking you were marrying into money and power, but you forgot something crucial. The money is mine. The power is mine. And I am extraordinarily protective of what's mine. The ambulance had arrived 12 minutes later, and Catherine had been loaded onto a stretcher, while paramedics had documented her injuries with professional efficiency. Contusions to the face and temple, multiple lacerations across the back, possible concussion, possible fractured ribs. As they'd wheeled her out, she'd seen Jonathan standing in the foyer, looking lost and small and furious. Maria had been crying quietly in the kitchen doorway, and her father had been making phone calls, his voice crisp and businesslike as he'd begun the systematic dismantling of Jonathan Sterling's entire existence. In the ambulance with an IV in her arm and her father holding her hand, Catherine had finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the moment he'd appeared. "How did you know to come?" William had squeezed her hand gently. "Richard Henley called me from his car. He said he'd had a very disturbing dinner at your home, that your husband had been inappropriate with another woman, and that when he'd left, he'd heard shouting. He said something felt very wrong, and he thought I should know. I got here as fast as I could. I should have come sooner. I should have known something was wrong months ago." "I didn't want you to worry," Catherine had whispered. "Catherine, you're my daughter. Worrying about you is my job. And I failed at it. But I promise you I won't fail again. Jonathan Sterling is going to regret the day he ever laid a hand on you. By the time I'm finished with him, he'll wish he'd never even heard the Sterling name. The ambulance had pulled into Greenwich Hospital's emergency entrance, and Catherine had closed her eyes as they'd wheeled her in, thinking that maybe, just maybe, this nightmare was finally beginning to end. She'd been wrong, of course. It wasn't ending. It was transforming. The nightmare was about to become a war, and Catherine was about to discover that she'd inherited more than her father's money. She'd inherited his capacity for absolute devastating surgical revenge. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and defeat, but Catherine barely noticed. She lay on her side because lying on her back meant pressing against the bandages that covered the belt marks, 15 distinct lacerations that the doctor had counted with clinical detachment while photographing each one for the medical record. Her father sat in the chair beside her bed, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and lethal as he spoke to someone Catherine couldn't identify. "I don't care if you have to wake the judge at home. I want a restraining order filed by 8 a.m. Monday morning. Emergency protective order tonight if possible. Yes, tonight. My daughter was beaten with a belt by her husband while his mistress filmed it. Does that sound like something that can wait until business hours?" Catherine closed her eyes and felt a tear slide down her cheek, tracing a path over the bruise that had already turned a sickening shade of purple. Her phone, her real phone that Jonathan had confiscated months ago, sat on the bedside table. Her father had retrieved it from Jonathan's study safe, along with her passport, her credit cards, and a stack of documents that Catherine hadn't even known existed. Prenuptial agreement, trust documentation, property deeds. Her entire life reduced to legal papers that proved she'd never actually had control of anything. Catherine. Her father's hand covered hers, warm and solid. "The nurse is bringing something for the pain. Try to rest." "I can't go back there." Her voice came out broken small. "Daddy, I can't go back to that house. You're not going back. Ever. I've already had your things packed. Maria and the staff are loading everything into a truck right now. You'll stay at the penthouse until we figure out next steps. He'll come after me. You don't know what he's like when he's angry. Tonight was bad, but if he thinks I'm actually leaving him, if he thinks I'm taking his meal ticket away, let him come." William's voice had gone cold again, that boardroom ice that had made grown men weep during hostile takeover negotiations. "I've already filed for the emergency protective order. I've had security stationed at every Sterling property, and I've made some calls to people who owe me favors. Jonathan Sterling won't be able to sneeze without me knowing about it." The nurse arrived with a small paper cup of pills and a gentle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She'd seen the photographs. She'd heard Catherine's story given in halting sentences to a patient advocate who documented everything with the kind of thoroughness that suggested this happened far more often than anyone wanted to admit. Domestic violence in a $75 million estate looked different than domestic violence in a trailer park. But the bruises were the same color regardless of your net worth. Catherine swallowed the pills and felt the edges of reality start to soften. She was drifting toward sleep when her father's phone rang again. He answered it immediately, listened for 30 seconds, then said something that made Catherine's eyes snap open despite the medication. "How much did she get?" Silence while whoever was on the other end responded. "Send it to my encrypted email, all of it. I want every frame, every angle, every second she recorded, and find out if she made copies." He hung up and met Catherine's questioning gaze. "That was Marcus, head of my security team. He tracked down Victoria Croft's car before she could leave Greenwich, pulled her over for a broken taillight." "She didn't have a broken taillight when she arrived." William smiled, and it was terrifying. "She did after Marcus's team finished with the traffic stop. They seized her phone as evidence of the illegal recording. She tried to claim Fifth Amendment protection, but Connecticut's wiretap laws are very clear. She committed a felony tonight, and now I have the only copy of that video." "What are you going to do with it?" "Insurance. Jonathan's going to try to spin this, try to make you look unstable or vindictive. But that video shows exactly what happened. It shows him beating you. It shows her laughing while he did it. It shows premeditation and conspiracy. And if he tries to fight the divorce or contest the protective order, that video becomes Exhibit A." Catherine felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been dormant for so long she'd forgotten it existed. It felt almost like hope, but sharper, angrier, more dangerous. "I want to destroy him." William squeezed her hand. "Good, because that's exactly what we're going to do." She'd slept fitfully, waking every time a nurse came to check her vitals or adjust her IV. Each time she woke, her father was still there working on his laptop or making hushed phone calls that suggested the entire Sterling Global legal department had been activated in the middle of the night. When she finally woke to stay awake, sunlight was streaming through the hospital window and a new doctor was reviewing her chart. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm Dr. Patricia Volkov. I've been consulting on your case. The good news is you don't have any broken bones. The concussion is mild. The lacerations are painful, but they'll heal. You'll have some scarring on your back, but nothing that plastic surgery can't minimize if you choose that route. Physically, you're going to be fine." Catherine heard the unspoken caveat. And mentally, Dr. Volkov pulled up a chair, her expression gentle but direct. "You've experienced severe domestic violence. The psychological trauma from that doesn't disappear just because the physical wounds heal. I'd like to refer you to a colleague of mine, Dr. Sarah Chen. She specializes in trauma therapy and has extensive experience with domestic abuse survivors. I think talking to her would be beneficial." "I don't need therapy. I need a divorce lawyer." "You need both," William interjected firmly. "Dr. Chen is expecting your call. I've already spoken with her." Catherine wanted to argue, wanted to insist she was strong enough to handle this on her own, but the truth was she didn't feel strong. She felt hollowed out, emptied of everything except rage and humiliation. So she nodded, took the business card Dr. Volkov offered, and watched her father add it to the growing stack of documents that represented her new life. They discharged her 3 hours later with prescriptions for pain medication, antibiotics, and sleeping pills she knew she wouldn't take because sleeping meant nightmares, and nightmares meant reliving Jonathan's face as the belt came down. Her father's driver brought the car around to a private exit, avoiding the handful of photographers who'd somehow learned that Catherine Sterling had been admitted to the emergency room. Someone had leaked it. Probably a hospital employee who'd recognized the name and seen an opportunity for quick cash. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building in Tribeca that William had purchased 15 years ago. Catherine had been there dozens of times for family dinners and holiday gatherings, but walking through the door now felt different. This wasn't a visit. This was refuge. This was the fortress where she'd rebuild herself into someone who could fight back. Maria was already there directing 2 younger women Catherine didn't recognize as they unpacked boxes in the master bedroom. When she saw Catherine, her face crumpled, and she rushed forward, stopping just short of an embrace, as if afraid to cause pain. "Señora, ay Dios mío, what that man did to you. I'm okay, Maria, really." Catherine managed a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "Thank you for packing my things. I know that couldn't have been easy with Jonathan there." Mr. Jonathan was not there. He left right after the ambulance, packed 1 suitcase and drove away like the devil was chasing him. Maria's voice dripped with satisfaction. "Good riddance to bad garbage." William appeared in the doorway, phone still attached to his ear, like a permanent accessory. "Catherine, I need you to look at something." He pulled up an email on his laptop, angling the screen so she could see it. "This is the divorce petition my attorneys drafted last night. I need you to read through it and tell me if there's anything you want to add or change." Catherine scanned the document, her eyes catching on phrases that seemed pulled from someone else's nightmare. Extreme cruelty, physical abuse, adultery, intentional infliction of emotional distress. It was all there documented in clinical legal language that somehow made it more real than living through it had. "There's nothing about Victoria. We're handling Victoria separately. She's going to face criminal charges for the illegal recording. I've also had my investigators start digging into her background. Something about her feels wrong, and I want to know exactly who my daughter's husband brought into my home." "What do you mean, wrong?" William's expression darkened. "Victoria Croft claims she runs a boutique marketing consultancy, but when my people started checking, nothing adds up. Her business has no web presence beyond a bare-bones website created 6 months ago. No client testimonials, no portfolio, no case studies. Her LinkedIn profile lists 3 previous employers, but 2 of them have no record of anyone by that name ever working there, and the 3rd went bankrupt 5 years ago. She's a ghost." Catherine felt ice water run down her spine. "So who is she really?" "That's what I'm going to find out. But my guess, she's a con artist who saw Jonathan as an easy mark, probably figured she could extract money from him by playing Mistress, maybe even push for him to leave you so she could step into your shoes. What she didn't count on was me." A phone buzzed, but this time it wasn't William's. It was Catherine's, the one that had been locked away for months. She picked it up and saw 47 missed calls from Jonathan, along with a stream of text messages that started apologetic and devolved into threatening over the course of 6 hours. Catherine, I'm so sorry. Please come home so we can talk about this. Your father is overreacting. I barely touched you. You're being dramatic. Answer your damn phone. We need to discuss this like adults. If you think you're going to take me for everything in a divorce, you're delusional. I'll fight you on every single point. You're making a huge mistake. I can make your life hell. Don't forget I know things about you, about your family. Your father can't protect you forever. Eventually you'll be alone again and I'll be waiting. Catherine's hands shook as she read them, each message a fresh violation. William took the phone from her gently and forwarded every text to an email address she didn't recognize. That's going to the attorneys and the police. Every threat, every attempt at contact, it all becomes evidence. He's digging his own grave and he doesn't even realize it. He said he knows things about our family. What does that mean? William's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He's grasping at straws, trying to scare you into backing down. There's nothing to know, Catherine. Our business is clean, our finances are transparent, and we have nothing to hide. Jonathan's bluffing because it's the only card he has left to play. But Catherine saw something flicker across her father's face, some micro-expression that suggested he wasn't being entirely truthful. Before she could press him on it, his phone rang again. This time, when he answered, his entire posture changed. Tell me you have something useful. He listened for nearly 2 minutes, his expression growing darker with each passing second. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely controlled fury. Are you absolutely certain you verified this independently? Another pause. Send me everything. I want documentation, photographs, bank records, everything you've got. He hung up and looked at Catherine with an expression she'd never seen before. It was protective rage mixed with something that looked almost like pity. What is it? Victoria Croft isn't her real name. It's Victoria Castellano. She's been married 3 times. The first husband filed for bankruptcy after their divorce and claimed she'd systematically drained his accounts. The second husband is serving time for embezzlement claims she set him up but couldn't prove it. The third husband died in what was ruled an accidental fall down the stairs of their home. She inherited everything. The life insurance alone was $2.3 million. Catherine felt her stomach drop. You think she killed him? I think she's a professional predator who targets wealthy men, embeds herself in their lives, and destroys them financially, and sometimes literally. And I think she chose Jonathan because she did her research and saw a weak man married to a very wealthy woman. She was playing the long game, Catherine. She wanted him to leave you, marry her, and give her access to what she thought was his fortune. What she didn't realize is that nothing Jonathan has actually belongs to him. It all belongs to me. Held in trust, controlled through legal structures she never would have been able to access. So I was just collateral damage. She encouraged him to abuse me so I'd leave him and make room for her. I think she encouraged him to abuse you so she could film it and use it as blackmail later. Think about it. If she had video of Jonathan committing felony assault, she could have threatened to go public unless he paid her off. Or she could have used it to force you into a quick, quiet divorce with a favorable settlement that would have made Jonathan look like the wronged party. She was building leverage. Catherine stood up too quickly and had to grab the back of the chair to steady herself as pain lanced through her ribs. I need air. I need to get out of this apartment. I feel like the walls are closing in. You can't leave, not yet. Jonathan's been parked outside your old building for the past 3 hours. He knows you're not there, but he's waiting to see if you show up. And the press is starting to circle. Page 6 already has a blind item about a socialite wife spotted in the emergency room with suspicious injuries. It's only a matter of time before they connect the dots and publish your name. So what am I supposed to do? Hide, let him control my life even more than he already has? I won't live like that, Daddy. I'd rather face him in broad daylight than spend one more second being afraid. William studied her for a long moment, and Catherine saw approval flicker across his face. Then we go on the offensive. We stop reacting and start controlling the narrative. I'll set up a meeting with the PR team. We craft a statement, release it on our terms, and make it clear that you're not a victim hiding in shame. You're a survivor who's taking back her power. But Catherine, once we do this, there's no going back. This becomes public. Your life becomes public. Every detail of your marriage, your abuse, your divorce, it all becomes fodder for the tabloids and the gossip sites and the court of public opinion. Are you ready for that? Catherine thought about Jonathan's face as the belt came down. She thought about Victoria's laugh echoing in her ears. She thought about 6 years of systematic humiliation and control and isolation. And she thought about the woman she used to be before Jonathan had slowly dismantled her piece by piece. I'm ready. Let's burn it all down. The PR team had arrived within the hour. 3 sharp-dressed professionals who'd managed crisis communications for everyone from embattled politicians to celebrity divorce scandals. They'd set up in the dining room laptops and tablets spread across the table, already drafting statement options and monitoring social media for any mention of Catherine's name. The key is controlling the narrative before someone else does, explained Jennifer Park, the lead strategist. Right now, the story is just rumor and speculation. But once it breaks, and it will break, we need to make sure your voice is the loudest in the room. We position you as strong, not broken, resilient, not defeated. And we make it clear that Jonathan Sterling is an abuser who's about to face consequences. Won't that prejudice potential jurors if there's a trial? Catherine asked. Jennifer exchanged a glance with William. There won't be a trial. Jonathan can't afford one legally or reputationally. We're going to make the evidence so overwhelming and so public that his only option will be to settle on your terms. But that means we need to move fast and move hard. No hesitation, no mercy. Can you handle that? Catherine looked down at her hands at the IV bruise on the back of her wrist and the defensive wounds on her palms where she'd tried to shield herself. What do you need me to do? I need you to tell me everything. Every instance of abuse, every threat, every moment of control. I need dates if you remember them. Details that can be corroborated by witnesses or documentation. I need the names of friends he isolated you from, family members he prevented you from seeing. I need bank records showing how he controlled your finances, phone records showing how he monitored your communication. I need everything, Catherine, because we're building a case so airtight that Jonathan Sterling will have no choice but to surrender. So Catherine talked. She talked for 3 hours straight, her voice breaking occasionally but never stopping recounting a marriage that had been a prison disguised as a fairy tale. She talked about the first time he'd raised his voice to her, 6 weeks after the wedding, when she'd suggested they spend Christmas with her family instead of his. She talked about the first time he'd grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises 3 months in, when she'd laughed at another man's joke at a dinner party. She talked about the systematic destruction of her friendships, her hobbies, her independence. She talked about the affair with Victoria that he'd flaunted in her face, bringing his mistress to their home, to their bed, making Catherine sleep in the guest room while Victoria occupied her space. Jennifer's team documented everything, cross-referencing details with calendar entries and social media posts and credit card receipts that painted a picture of escalating control and abuse. By the time Catherine finished, the sun had set and her throat was raw from talking. "This is good," Jennifer said, though her expression suggested she found nothing good about what she'd heard. "This is more than good. This is a prosecutorial case study in domestic abuse. Catherine, with your permission, I'd like to arrange an interview with a major media outlet. Someone sympathetic, someone who will let you tell your story without sensationalizing it. I'm thinking Gayle King on CBS, or maybe a sit-down with Anderson Cooper. Someone with gravitas, who'll treat this with the seriousness it deserves." "Absolutely not." William's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Catherine's not doing any interviews. This stays in statements and legal filings. With respect, Mr. Sterling, that's a mistake. The public is going to see her eventually, in court, leaving her lawyer's office, attending depositions. Wouldn't you rather control that first impression? Let her speak for herself, instead of having her story filtered through court reporters and tabloid journalists. My daughter is not entertainment. She's not going to parade her trauma on national television for ratings." Catherine stood up slowly, wincing as the movement pulled at her stitches. "Actually, I think I should do it." William turned to her, surprise evident on his face. "Catherine, how many other women are sitting in their homes right now, being abused by their husbands, thinking they can't leave because no one will believe them? How many women think that domestic violence only happens to poor women? Uneducated women. Women without resources. I have every advantage possible, and I still couldn't escape for 6 years. If I can show them that it can happen to anyone, that it's not their fault, that there's a way out, doesn't that matter?" Jennifer was nodding enthusiastically. "That's exactly the angle. Catherine Sterling, daughter of a billionaire living in a mansion and still trapped in an abusive marriage. It breaks every stereotype people have about domestic violence. It forces people to confront the fact that money doesn't protect you from violence, privilege doesn't protect you from abuse, and staying has nothing to do with weakness." William was silent for a long moment, his hand rubbing his face in a gesture Catherine recognized from her childhood. It was what he did when he was wrestling with a decision he didn't like but knew was right. Finally, he looked at her and said, "If you want to do this, I'll support you. But the moment it becomes too much, the moment you want to stop, we stop." Agreed. Agreed. Jennifer pulled out her phone, already dialing. "I'll call Anderson Cooper's producer. We'll pitch it as an exclusive first interview Catherine's story in her own words. We air it Sunday night primetime right before the divorce petition becomes public record on Monday morning. By the time Jonathan wakes up Monday, the entire country will know exactly what he did." 2 days later, Catherine sat in a studio in Manhattan, makeup carefully applied to look natural while still covering the worst of the bruising, wearing a soft gray sweater that suggested vulnerability without victimhood. Anderson Cooper sat across from her, his expression compassionate but professional, and between them hung the weight of a story that was about to explode across every news outlet in America. "Catherine, thank you for sitting down with me. I know this can't be easy." "It's not," Catherine said, and was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "But it's necessary. For too long I've let shame and fear keep me silent, and that silence almost killed me." Anderson leaned forward slightly. "Tell me what happened 3 nights ago at your home in Greenwich." And Catherine told him. She told him everything. The cameras rolled, and somewhere in a hotel room in Connecticut, Jonathan Sterling watched his entire world end in real time, broadcast in high definition to millions of viewers who would never see him as anything other than a monster. Victoria Castellano, watching from her attorney's office where she'd gone to ground after learning about the criminal investigation, realized that her carefully constructed life of targeting wealthy men had just reached its spectacular conclusion. And William Sterling, watching from the penthouse with his security team on high alert, allowed himself the smallest smile of satisfaction. The war had begun, and they'd just fired the opening shot that would be heard around the world. The interview aired at 9 p.m. Eastern, and by 9:15, Catherine's phone had exploded with notifications she couldn't bring herself to read. She sat in the penthouse living room, her father beside her on the couch, watching the television screen as Anderson Cooper's voice narrated B-roll footage of Greygate's exterior, the mansion looking both imposing and sinister in the evening light. "That beautiful home became my prison," Catherine heard herself say on screen, and the woman speaking looked like her, but sounded stronger, clearer, more certain than she'd felt in years. "My husband systematically destroyed every connection I had to the outside world. He took my phone, my car keys, my credit cards. He monitored my every movement, and when I tried to resist, when I tried to assert even the smallest amount of independence, he punished me." Anderson's face filled the screen, his expression grave. "And that punishment escalated to physical violence. Yes, it started small, a grab that was too rough, a push that sent me into a wall. Each time he'd apologize, promise it would never happen again, tell me he loved me too much, and that's why he got so emotional. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because admitting the truth meant admitting I'd made a catastrophic mistake in marrying him." William's hand found Catherine's, squeezing gently. On screen, Anderson was asking about the night 3 days ago, and Catherine watched her own face tighten as she recounted Jonathan's violence and Victoria's laughter. The network had blurred the photographs of her injuries, but they'd shown enough. The bruising, the split lip, the bandages covering her back. Victoria Croft, who you've identified as your husband's mistress, was filming this attack on her phone. Why do you think she did that? Catherine on screen had paused, gathering her thoughts, and Catherine on the couch remembered that moment, remembered the publicist's coaching about staying calm, staying controlled, letting the facts speak for themselves. "I think she was building leverage. I think she planned to use that video to blackmail my husband or to force me into a divorce that would benefit her financially. What she didn't count on was my father arriving when he did and confiscating that phone." Your father, William Sterling, is the CEO of Sterling Global. Some critics might say that you're only able to escape this situation because of your family's wealth and power. What would you say to women who don't have those resources? The Catherine on screen had looked directly into the camera, and the Catherine on the couch felt tears prick her eyes, remembering what she'd said next. "I'd say that I had every advantage possible, and I still couldn't leave for 6 years. I had money, education, family support, and I was still trapped because abuse doesn't discriminate based on net worth. But you're right that resources matter. That's why I'm announcing tonight that I'm establishing the Sterling Foundation for Domestic Violence Support. It will provide legal assistance, emergency housing, financial support, and counseling for abuse survivors who need help escaping dangerous situations. because everyone deserves the protection and resources that my father was able to provide me, regardless of their bank account. William turned to her, surprise evident on his face. You didn't mention you were going to announce the foundation. I know. I wanted it to be real first, not just a soundbite. I talked to Jennifer this morning and she helped me set up the initial framework. I'm putting $10 million of my trust fund into it to start. More later after the divorce settlement comes through. Catherine, don't try to talk me out of it. This is the first decision I've made entirely on my own in 6 years, and I'm not backing down. William smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Catherine had seen from him in days. I wasn't going to talk you out of it. I was going to say I'll match your contribution. $20 million should make a substantial impact. Catherine's phone buzzed insistently, and this time she looked. The first message was from Sarah Chen, her new therapist whom she'd seen twice already despite the media chaos. Watching your interview. So proud of how far you've come in just 3 days. Call me if you need to process anything afterward. The second message made her blood run cold. It was from a number she didn't recognize, but the content made the sender obvious. You stupid bitch. You just destroyed both of our lives. I hope you're happy. I hope it was worth it when you're left with nothing. Jonathan. William's phone rang before Catherine could show him the text. He answered, listened for 10 seconds, then stood abruptly. When is anyone hurt? A pause. I'm on my way. Triple the security detail and call the police. He hung up and turned to Catherine, his face ashen. Jonathan just showed up at the Greenwich house. He's trying to break in through the back entrance. Security's contained him, but he's screaming that everything in that house belongs to him and he's not leaving without taking what's his. Catherine felt ice water flood her veins. He knows where I am. He just texted me. William grabbed her phone, read the message, and immediately called someone. Marcus, I need you at the Tribeca penthouse now with a full team. Jonathan's making threats, and I want Catherine protected. He turned back to Catherine, already moving toward his coat. I have to go deal with this, but you're not staying here alone. Maria's in the guest room. I'm having Marcus bring 3 security personnel to stay with you until I get back. Do not open the door for anyone. Do not leave this apartment. Do you understand? What are you going to do? I'm going to give your husband exactly 1 chance to walk away from this quietly. After that, I destroy him completely. William left in a rush of expensive cologne and barely contained fury, and Catherine found herself alone in the vast penthouse, the television still playing her own interview to an audience of no one. She turned it off and sat in the sudden silence, listening to her own heartbeat and the distant sound of Manhattan traffic 40 floors below. Maria appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands anxiously. Senora, you should eat something. You barely touched dinner. I'm not hungry. You need your strength. For what's coming, you need to be strong. Catherine looked at the woman who'd been more of a mother to her than her own mother who'd died when Catherine was 12. Maria, why didn't you tell me how bad things were? You saw what Jonathan was doing. You knew. Maria's face crumpled. I tried, Senora. I tried so many times, but he threatened me. He said if I spoke to your father, if I tried to help you, he would have me deported. My sister, my nieces. We are here on work visas that Mr. Sterling sponsored. Jonathan said he would make sure we all got sent back to Mexico. I am ashamed. I should have been braver. I should have helped you anyway. You were protecting your family, I understand that. Catherine stood and crossed to Maria, pulling her into a careful hug that avoided her still healing back. You packed my things when it mattered. You got me out of there. That took courage, too. A phone rang, but it wasn't Catherine's or Maria's. It was the house phone, an actual landline that Catherine hadn't realized still existed. Maria answered it cautiously, then held it out to Catherine with a trembling hand. It's for you. She says her name is Victoria. Catherine's first instinct was to refuse the call to hang up and block the number, but curiosity won out, or maybe it was rage. She took the phone, her hand surprisingly steady. What do you want? Victoria's voice came through crystal clear, stripped of the sultry confidence Catherine remembered from that terrible dinner. She sounded frantic, desperate. I need to talk to you. In person. Alone. It's important. You filmed my husband beating me, and now you want a friendly chat. Are you insane? I didn't know he was going to go that far. I swear I didn't know. I thought he was just going to yell at you, maybe scare you a little. When he got the belt, I tried to leave, but he blocked the door. He made me film it. Catherine laughed, and the sound was bitter enough to etch glass. You're lying. You laughed while he beat me. I heard you. This is perfect, you said. Those were your exact words. Silence on the other end. Then Victoria's voice came back, smaller, quieter. Okay, Yes. I laughed because I was terrified and didn't know what else to do. I laughed because Jonathan gets violent when people don't react the way he wants them to, and I needed him to think I was on his side. You don't know what he's really like, Catherine. You don't know what he's capable of. I know exactly what he's capable of. I was married to him for 6 years. Then you know he's not going to just accept this divorce and move on. He's going to fight back, and when he fights back, people get hurt. I'm calling because I have information. Information about Jonathan that your father needs to know. Information that could protect you. Catherine's grip tightened on the phone. What information? Not over the phone. I need to meet you somewhere public, somewhere safe. Tomorrow morning. There's a coffee shop on. I'm not meeting you anywhere. If you have information, you can give it to my father's attorneys. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you, especially since you're currently facing felony charges for illegally recording me. Those charges go away if I cooperate with your father's investigation. My lawyer already worked out a deal. I testify against Jonathan in the divorce proceedings. I provide all the documentation I have about his business dealings, and the DA drops the wiretap charges down to a misdemeanor with probation. Catherine felt the room tilt slightly. What business dealings? Jonathan works for my father. He doesn't have independent business dealings. That's what you think. That's what your father thinks. But Jonathan's been running his own operation on the side for the past 3 years. Embezzlement, fraud, money laundering. He's been using Sterling Global's reputation and your father's connections to facilitate deals that have nothing to do with company business. And he's been very, very careful to make sure the paper trail leads back to William Sterling, not to him. The words hit Catherine like physical blows. You're lying. You're trying to manipulate me into meeting you so you can hurt me, film me again. I'm not that stupid, Victoria. I'm trying to save both of our lives. Jonathan called me 2 hours ago, right after your interview aired. He said that you and your father have declared war, and in war, there are always casualties. He said if he's going down, he's taking everyone with him. He specifically said that you and I were at the top of his list. Catherine, I'm genuinely afraid of him. I think he might actually try to hurt us. Catherine heard the security team arriving in the foyer, Marcus's deep voice issuing instructions to the other guards. She felt marginally safer, knowing they were there, but Victoria's words had planted seeds of doubt she couldn't ignore. If you really have evidence of Jonathan's criminal activity, why haven't you gone to the police? Because some of that criminal activity involves people who make Jonathan look like a Boy Scout. I'm talking about organized crime connections, Catherine. Money laundering for people who don't take kindly to witnesses. If I go to the police without protection, without some kind of immunity deal that covers all of it, I'm dead. So yes, I made a deal with your father's legal team. I cooperate fully, I get protection, and the charges against me get reduced. It's self-preservation. Send the evidence to my father's attorneys. Email it, fax it, put it on a thumb drive and mail it. But I am not meeting you. The evidence is in a safe deposit box. The key is in my apartment. And my apartment is currently under surveillance by people I don't recognize who are definitely not police or your father's security team. I can't go back there alone, Catherine. I need help, and you're the only person who has any reason to want this evidence as badly as I need to get rid of it. Catherine pressed her free hand to her forehead, feeling the beginning of a headache forming behind her eyes. Why would I possibly trust you? You participated in my abuse. You enjoyed it. You laughed while I was beaten. Give me one good reason why I should believe anything you're saying. Because I'm telling you that your husband is planning something terrible, and when it happens, you're going to wish you'd listen to me. Jonathan has been building a plan B for years. Money hidden in offshore accounts, fake identities, connections to people who can make problems disappear. And right now, Catherine, you're his biggest problem. He's not going to just let your father destroy him. He's going to strike back, and he's going to strike hard. The line went dead. Victoria had hung up, leaving Catherine standing in the penthouse, holding a phone that suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his 6'4" frame filling the space completely. Ma'am, we've secured the perimeter. You're safe here. Your father called from Greenwich. He wants to talk to you. Catherine took Marcus's phone with hands that weren't quite steady. Daddy. Catherine, listen to me carefully. Jonathan's been arrested. He attacked one of the security guards trying to get into the house. Punched him in the face, broke his nose. The Greenwich police have him in custody now. He's being charged with assault, trespassing, and violation of the restraining order. He's not getting bail tonight. Relief flooded through Catherine so intensely she had to sit down. He can't get to me. He can't hurt me. Not tonight. But Catherine, his lawyer, is already making noises about bail being set tomorrow. They're arguing he's not a flight risk, that he has ties to the community, all the usual nonsense. The DA is going to push back hard, but there's a chance a judge could grant bail with conditions. What kind of conditions? House arrest, ankle monitor, no contact orders. But Catherine, those are just pieces of paper. If Jonathan decides to violate them, the only thing stopping him is fear of consequences, and I'm not sure he's rational enough right now to care about consequences. Catherine thought about Victoria's call about the warnings and the claims about organized crime and money laundering. "Daddy, I need to tell you something. Victoria Croft just called me." The silence on the other end was profound. When William finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. What did she want? "She says Jonathan's been involved in criminal activity, embezzlement, fraud, money laundering. She says he's been running his own operation using Sterling Global's reputation and that he's made the paper trail lead back to you instead of him. She wants to meet with me to retrieve evidence from her apartment." "Absolutely not. You are not going anywhere near that woman. This is obviously a trap." "That's what I thought too. But Daddy, what if she's telling the truth? What if Jonathan has been committing crimes in your name? What if he's built some kind of case that makes you look guilty?" She heard her father take a deep breath, the sound of a man forcibly controlling his temper. "If Victoria has evidence, she can provide it through the proper channels. My attorneys have been in contact with her legal team. If she's cooperating, she knows how to get information to us safely. She says her apartment is being watched by people who aren't police and aren't your security team." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll have Marcus send a team to check it out. In the meantime, you stay exactly where you are. Don't answer any more calls from numbers you don't recognize. Don't open the door for anyone except people Marcus personally approves. And Catherine, if Victoria contacts you again, you tell her that any further communication needs to go through attorneys. Do you understand? Yes. I'm going to be here for another few hours dealing with the police and making sure the charges stick. Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be difficult." Catherine hung up and handed the phone back to Marcus, who'd been listening to her side of the conversation with professional attentiveness. "Ma'am, your father's right. You shouldn't have contact with Victoria Croft. She's demonstrated that she's willing to participate in violence against you. Nothing she says can be trusted." I know that. But Marcus, what if Jonathan really has been committing crimes? What if he set up my father to take the fall? My dad built Sterling Global from nothing. It's his entire legacy. If Jonathan destroys that, then we'll deal with it. But we'll deal with it smart, not by walking into traps set by desperate criminals. Marcus moved to the windows, checking the street 40 floors below. "The team your father sent is going to do rotating shifts. 2 men inside at all times, one monitoring the elevator, one monitoring this floor. There's no way Jonathan or anyone else gets to you tonight." Catherine nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her stomach like a stone. She retreated to the master bedroom, Maria following, to help her change into pajamas and take her evening medications. The pills were supposed to help with pain and sleep, but Catherine doubted anything short of unconsciousness would quiet the thoughts racing through her mind. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the penthouse at night. Footsteps in the hallway as security guards changed positions. The low murmur of voices as they communicated via radio. The distant wail of sirens somewhere in Manhattan's endless night. She must have eventually fallen asleep because she woke with a start to her phone ringing the screen showing 4:37 a.m. and an unknown number. She should have ignored it. She should have blocked it and gone back to sleep. But something made her answer some instinct that this call was important. "Catherine Sterling." The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. "Who is this?" "My name is Detective Robert Marsh with the Connecticut State Police. I'm calling about your husband, Jonathan Sterling. Ma'am, there's been an incident." Catherine sat bolt upright, her heart hammering. What kind of incident? Jonathan Sterling was being held at the Greenwich Police Department pending arraignment. At approximately 3:45 this morning, he suffered what appears to have been a severe allergic reaction. He went into anaphylactic shock. "Ma'am, I'm very sorry to tell you this, but your husband died 20 minutes ago." The words didn't make sense. Catherine heard them individually, but couldn't assemble them into coherent meaning. That's impossible. Jonathan doesn't have allergies. The medical examiner will determine cause of death, but preliminary investigation suggests he ingested something he was severely allergic to. We're reviewing security footage from the holding cell and interviewing everyone who had contact with him. Ma'am, I know this is a shock, but I need to ask you some questions. Where have you been for the past 6 hours? Here, at my father's penthouse in Manhattan. I've had security guards with me all night. Are you suggesting I had something to do with this? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm gathering information. Can anyone corroborate your whereabouts? 3 security guards, my housekeeper, and about 15 surveillance cameras. Detective, what exactly are you implying? Ma'am, your interview aired on national television last night. You detailed serious allegations of abuse against your husband. Hours later, he's arrested. Hours after that, he's dead under suspicious circumstances. You have to understand that we need to investigate all possibilities. Catherine felt hysteria building in her chest. I wanted him to suffer legal consequences. I wanted him to lose everything in the divorce. I wanted him to spend years knowing that he'd destroyed his life by abusing me. I did not want him dead. Death is too easy. Death lets him escape accountability. I understand. Ma'am, is your father, William Sterling, currently with you? No, he's in Greenwich. He was dealing with Jonathan's arrest at the house earlier tonight. Why? We'll need to speak with him as well. Ma'am, I strongly suggest you retain criminal counsel. This is now a suspicious death investigation, possibly a homicide, and you and your father both had motive and opportunity. The call ended and Catherine sat in the darkness of the bedroom, her phone clutched in her hand, feeling the walls of her new reality closing in. She'd escaped one nightmare, only to wake up in another. And this one was somehow worse, because Jonathan's death meant she'd never get the closure of watching him face consequences for what he'd done. Worse still, it meant someone had killed him, and the police clearly thought she or her father had ordered it. She stumbled out of bed and into the living room where Marcus was receiving a phone call of his own. He looked at Catherine, and she saw her own shock reflected in his expression. Ma'am, your father's on his way back from Greenwich. He said to tell you not to speak to anyone, including the police, without an attorney present. He's already called your legal team. Marcus, I didn't do this. I didn't have anything to do with Jonathan's death. I know, ma'am, but someone did. And whoever killed Jonathan Sterling just made this situation exponentially more complicated. Catherine sank onto the couch, her mind reeling. Jonathan was dead. Her abuser was dead. The man who'd beaten her, controlled her, terrorized her for 6 years was gone. She should have felt relief, maybe even joy. Instead, she felt nothing but a creeping sense of horror as she realized that someone had murdered her husband in a police station, and the only people with clear motive were her and her father. Victoria's words from hours earlier echoed in her mind. Jonathan has connections to people who make problems disappear. Had he gotten himself killed? Had he arranged his own death somehow, knowing it would implicate Catherine and William? Or had someone else decided that a dead Jonathan was more valuable than a living one? The sun rose over Manhattan, painting the penthouse in shades of gold and amber that felt obscene given the circumstances. Catherine sat motionless as her phone exploded with notifications. News outlets reporting Jonathan's death, social media erupting with conspiracy theories, text messages from numbers she didn't recognize, some offering condolences, some accusing her of murder. And through it all, one thought kept circling through her mind like a vulture over carrion. She'd wanted to destroy Jonathan, but someone had beaten her to it. The question was who, and more importantly, why. William arrived at the penthouse at 6:43 a.m., looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. His tie was loosened, his normally immaculate hair disheveled, and when he looked at Catherine, she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear. Tell me everything the detective said, word for word. Catherine recounted the conversation while William paced the length of the living room, his jaw working as he processed each detail. When she finished, he pulled out his phone and made a call that went straight to voicemail. He tried 2 more numbers with the same result before finally getting someone to answer. David, I don't care if it's 6 in the morning. I need criminal defense attorneys at my office in 1 hour. The best you've got. No, not corporate defense, murder defense. He paused, listening. Yes, murder. Jonathan's dead, and the Connecticut State Police think Catherine or I killed him. Get me lawyers who've handled high-profile homicide cases and won them. Price is irrelevant. He hung up and turned to Catherine. You don't speak to the police without counsel present. You don't speak to reporters. You don't speak to anyone. From this moment forward, everything you say can and will be used against you. I didn't kill him, Daddy. You have to believe me. Of course I believe you, but it doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what the prosecution can prove or make a jury believe. And right now we've handed them motive on a silver platter. You went on national television and detailed years of abuse. You announced you were divorcing him and taking everything. Then he turns up dead in police custody hours later. Every prosecutor in the country would salivate over a case this clean. Maria appeared from the kitchen with coffee that Catherine couldn't imagine drinking, but took anyway because her hands needed something to hold. "Senor Sterling, the news is saying Jonathan was poisoned. They're saying someone put something in his food." William stopped pacing. What food? He was in a holding cell. What food would he have access to? "The news says a guard brought him dinner from a restaurant. They're interviewing the guard now. He's saying he just picked up what was ordered. He didn't know anything was wrong with it." Catherine felt the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Someone ordered food, had it delivered to the police station, and the guard just gave it to Jonathan without checking it, without questioning where it came from. The guard is saying Jonathan called someone from the holding cell phone and placed the order himself, gave the restaurant a credit card number over the phone, said his lawyer was sending food since he'd missed dinner. William's phone rang, and he answered immediately. "Talk to me." He listened for nearly 2 minutes, his expression growing darker. "Are you absolutely certain? Triple check it. I want confirmation before we move on this information." He hung up and looked at Catherine with an expression she couldn't quite read. That was Marcus. His team pulled surveillance footage from the area around Victoria's apartment. She wasn't lying about being watched. "There are 2 men in a car that's been parked across the street for the past 18 hours. Marcus ran the license plate. The car is registered to a shell company that traces back to several known organized crime figures. So Victoria was telling the truth about Jonathan having criminal connections. It appears so, which means we're not just dealing with a suspicious death investigation. We're dealing with organized crime, money laundering, and God knows what else Jonathan got himself involved in. William sat heavily on the couch, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. "Catherine, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago but kept quiet because I thought I was protecting you." Catherine's stomach dropped. "What?" 2 years ago, one of my financial auditors flagged some irregularities in several Sterling Global accounts. Nothing major, just small discrepancies that didn't add up. I ordered a quiet internal investigation. The trail led to Jonathan. He'd been siphoning money from company accounts, small amounts spread across multiple divisions so it wouldn't trigger automatic alerts. Over 3 years, he'd stolen approximately $12 million. The number hit Catherine like a physical blow. $12 million, and you didn't tell me you didn't have him arrested. I confronted him privately. He claimed he'd been making investments on behalf of the company, that he was planning to return the money with interest, that it was all a misunderstanding. I told him I wanted every penny back within 6 months, or I'd have him prosecuted. He agreed, and then he started paying it back slowly but consistently. I thought the problem was solved. I thought he'd learned his lesson, and we could move forward without destroying your marriage over his stupidity. My marriage was already destroyed. He was beating me while you were giving him chances to make things right. William's face crumpled. "I know. God, Catherine, I know. And that's something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. I prioritized protecting the company's reputation over protecting you. I was a coward, and you paid the price." Catherine wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at her father for keeping this secret, but she was too exhausted, too overwhelmed by the tsunami of revelations that kept crashing over her. Did he pay it all back? No. He paid back about $4 million, and then the payment stopped 8 months ago. When I pressed him about it, he said he was having temporary cash flow problems and would resume payments soon. I should have pushed harder. I should have realized something bigger was happening. The organized crime connections. He needed the stolen money to pay off debts or invest in whatever illegal operation he was running. And when he couldn't pay it back to you, he had to keep stealing to feed the criminal enterprise. That's my theory. And if I'm right, then Jonathan's death might not be about you or your interview at all. It might be about him owing the wrong people money he couldn't pay back. Criminals don't take kindly to partners who become liabilities. Catherine's phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her check. The message was short and terrifying. "They're going to arrest your father within 24 hours unless you do exactly what I say. Come to the address below. Alone. 1 hour. Victoria." Catherine showed the text to William, whose face went white. "That's a trap. It has to be a trap. But what if it's not? What if she really does have information that could clear you, Daddy? I can't let you get arrested for a murder you didn't commit. I can't sit here and do nothing while your entire life gets destroyed." Catherine, think about this rationally. Victoria Croft has demonstrated that she cannot be trusted. She participated in your abuse. She filmed you being beaten. She's currently trying to avoid prosecution by cooperating with investigators. Everything she says and does is about self-preservation. If she's contacting you now, it's because she wants something, and whatever she wants is not in your best interest. Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Ma'am, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Says her name is Detective Sarah Mitchell with the Connecticut Major Crimes Unit." William stood immediately. "Catherine doesn't speak to police without her attorneys present. Actually, Mr. Sterling, Detective Mitchell said she's not here in an official capacity. She said to tell Miss Sterling that she has information about Victoria Castellano that needs to be shared immediately, and if Miss Sterling doesn't hear what she has to say, someone else is going to die tonight." Catherine and William exchanged looks. William nodded once, and Marcus stepped aside to allow a woman in her mid-40s to enter. She wore jeans and a blazer, her shield clipped to her belt, her expression grim. "Miss Sterling." "Mr. Sterling, thank you for seeing me. I know this is highly irregular, but I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because time is critical and lives are at stake." William's voice was hard. "Are you here to arrest my daughter?" "No, I'm here to warn her. Victoria Castellano, who you know as Victoria Croft, is not who she's been pretending to be. She's not just a con artist with a history of targeting wealthy men. She's a confidential informant for the FBI, has been for the past 18 months. The room went completely silent. Catherine felt like all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. "What?" Victoria was recruited by the FBI after her third husband died under suspicious circumstances. They offered her immunity in exchange for infiltrating organized crime networks that prey on wealthy individuals. Her job was to get close to targets the FBI suspected of being involved in money laundering and fraud, gather evidence, and report back to her handlers. Jonathan Sterling became a target 6 months ago when financial intelligence flagged him for suspicious transactions. William found his voice first. "You're telling me that Victoria was a federal agent, that she infiltrated my company, seduced my son-in-law, and participated in my daughter's abuse, all as part of an FBI operation. I'm telling you that Victoria was supposed to gather evidence against Jonathan. She was not authorized to participate in domestic violence. That video she filmed, her FBI handlers didn't know about it until after it was confiscated by your security team. When they found out, they were furious. Victoria went rogue. She got emotionally involved with Jonathan and crossed lines that informants are never supposed to cross." Catherine felt hysteria bubbling up in her throat. "She got emotionally involved. She laughed while he beat me with a belt. That's what you call emotionally involved." Detective Mitchell's expression was pained. "Miss Sterling, I understand your anger. What happened to you was unconscionable, and Victoria's actions were criminal, regardless of her status as an informant. But right now, I need you to focus on the immediate threat. Victoria contacted you tonight, didn't she? Asked you to meet her somewhere? How do you know that? Because she contacted 3 other people with the same message. Different locations, different times, but the same basic setup. She's trying to extract people from their secure locations and get them alone. Miss Sterling, Victoria didn't go rogue because she fell in love with Jonathan. She went rogue because she's been compromised by the organized crime network she was supposed to be investigating. They figured out she was FBI, and they've been using her to set up targets. Jonathan's death wasn't about unpaid debts. It was a message, and you and your father are the next names on the list." "Us." William moved to stand between Catherine and the detective protective instinct overriding everything else. "If what you're saying is true, why isn't the FBI here? Why are you a Connecticut state detective telling us this?" "Because the FBI doesn't know I'm here. I'm investigating Jonathan's death, and during my investigation, I uncovered information about Victoria's real identity. When I tried to contact her FBI handlers, I got stonewalled, told to back off, told it was need to know, and I didn't need to know. That's when I realized something was very wrong. The FBI is either incompetent or complicit. Either they've lost control of their informant, or they're using her to clean up loose ends. Either way, you two are in danger." Catherine's phone buzzed again. Another text from Victoria. 30 minutes. "If you're not here, your father dies tonight and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you could have saved him." She's escalating, getting desperate. Detective Mitchell pulled out her own phone. "Miss Sterling, I need you to respond to that text. Tell her you'll meet her. Tell her you're coming alone, and then let me and my team handle the rest. You want to use my daughter as bait." William's voice could have frozen nitrogen. "I want to arrest Victoria Castellano before she kills anyone else. Because make no mistake, Jonathan's death was just the beginning. Whoever's pulling Victoria's strings has decided that everyone connected to Jonathan's criminal activities needs to be eliminated. That includes you, Mr. Sterling, because of the embezzlement your company covered up. That includes you, Miss Sterling, because you're the witness who can testify to Victoria's crimes. And it includes at least 3 other people connected to Jonathan's business dealings who we've been trying to contact all morning. Who are these other people? Catherine asked. Richard Henley, the investor who was at your house for dinner the night you were attacked, David Pacheco, Jonathan's personal attorney, and Christine Harding, his former assistant, who quit 6 months ago after, according to her exit interview, Jonathan made unwanted advances. All 3 of them had knowledge of Jonathan's activities. All 3 of them received texts from Victoria this morning asking them to meet her privately. And all 3 of them have stopped answering their phones. Catherine felt cold sweat break out across her back. You think they're already dead? I think we have a very narrow window to catch Victoria in the act before she completes her assignment and disappears. And I think the only way to do that is to give her what she wants. A meeting with you, Miss Sterling, except instead of killing you, she walks into a trap. William shook his head violently. Absolutely not. I will not allow my daughter to be used as bait in some vigilante operation run by a detective who's operating outside her jurisdiction and apparently without backup from federal authorities. Then she dies anyway, Mr. Sterling. Just slower. You can hire all the security you want, but if the people behind Victoria want you dead, they'll find a way. They got to Jonathan in a police station. Do you really think your penthouse is safer than that? Catherine looked at her father and saw the impossible choice written across his face. Risk her life now in a controlled operation or wait for an uncontrolled attack that could come at any moment. She made the decision before he could protest further. What do I need to do? Catherine, no. Daddy, she's right. Hiding isn't going to work. These people got to Jonathan in custody. They'll get to us eventually. At least this way we're taking the fight to them on our terms. Detective Mitchell was already texting on her phone, presumably alerting her team. The address Victoria gave you is a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Industrial area, mostly abandoned, perfect for an ambush. We'll have teams positioned around the perimeter. You'll wear a wire. The moment Victoria makes a threatening move or reveals who she's working for, we move in and arrest her. And if something goes wrong, William's voice was tight with barely controlled panic, then I've already failed at the most important job I've ever had, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. But Mr. Sterling, if we don't do this, you're both dead anyway. At least this way you have a fighting chance. 2 hours later, Catherine sat in the back of an unmarked police car, 3 blocks from the warehouse, a wire taped to her chest, an earpiece hidden behind her hair, and fear churning in her stomach like acid. Detective Mitchell sat beside her, going over the plan for the 3rd time. You walk in through the front entrance. Don't try to be clever. Don't try to explore. Go exactly where Victoria tells you to go. Keep her talking. Ask questions. We need her to reveal who she's working for and what the end goal is. The moment you feel unsafe, say the word red and we come in. But Catherine, try to wait until we have what we need. This might be our only chance to break this case open. And if Victoria isn't working alone, if there are people waiting inside to kill me the moment I walk through that door, then we adapt. But our surveillance suggests she's alone. Heat signatures show one person inside, no vehicles in the immediate area except hers. We're as prepared as we can be. Catherine adjusted the wire, acutely aware of every sound it made. Detective, can I ask you something? Why are you doing this? You said yourself this is outside your jurisdiction. You're risking your career, maybe your life. Why? Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. Because 15 years ago, I watched my sister get beaten by her husband. I watched her make excuses for him, defend him, go back to him over and over again. And then one day, I got a call that she was dead. He'd finally hit her hard enough to kill her. I became a cop because of that. And when I saw your interview, when I heard you talk about the abuse and the control and the fear I saw my sister, I couldn't save her, but maybe I can save you. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. I'm sorry about your sister. So am I. Which is why we're going to make sure Victoria and whoever she's working for face justice. You ready? Catherine wasn't ready. She didn't think she'd ever be ready. But she nodded anyway and stepped out of the car into the cold morning air. The warehouse loomed ahead, all broken windows and rusted metal, a monument to urban decay and abandoned industry. She walked toward it each step, feeling like it might be her last, her heart hammering so hard she was sure Victoria would hear it the moment she entered. The door was unlocked. Catherine pushed it open and stepped into darkness that smelled like oil and rot and fear. Her eyes adjusted slowly, revealing a vast empty space with a single figure standing in the center under a shaft of light from a broken skylight. Victoria looked different than she had at Greygate. Her hair was pulled back severely, her designer clothes replaced with jeans and a leather jacket, her expression stripped of all pretense. She looked like what she really was, a predator. "You actually came. I wasn't sure you would." Catherine kept her distance, positioning herself so the teams outside would have clear sight lines through the windows. "You said you had information that would save my father's life. I'm here for that and nothing else." "Your father's life?" Victoria laughed, and it was nothing like the cruel laughter from the night of the beating. This was bitter, exhausted. "Catherine, your father's life ended the moment he decided to cover up Jonathan's embezzlement. Did he tell you about that? About how he knew Jonathan was stealing millions and did nothing?" "He told me he thought he was handling it quietly. He was protecting his reputation. Sterling Global's pristine image couldn't be tarnished by the revelation that the CEO's son-in-law was a thief. So William Sterling made a deal with the devil. He gave Jonathan time to pay back the money, and in return, Jonathan had leverage. He had proof that William knew about the theft and covered it up. That's conspiracy, Catherine. That's aiding and abetting. Your father could go to prison for what he did. Is that what this is about? Blackmail? You're going to threaten to expose my father unless what he pays you. I'm going to expose your father because he deserves to be exposed, just like Jonathan deserved to die." Victoria took a step closer, and Catherine instinctively backed up. "You wanted to know why I laughed that night, why I filmed you being beaten, because I needed that video, Catherine. I needed irrefutable proof of what Jonathan was capable of so that when he turned up dead, everyone would understand why. I gave you justice. I gave you the evidence to destroy him legally. And then I gave you the permanent solution. You should be thanking me." Catherine felt her blood run cold. "You killed him. You poisoned Jonathan. I liberated you. I liberated your father. I liberated everyone Jonathan had power over. And yes, I made sure it happened in a way that would point suspicion at you and William, because that's what my employers wanted. They wanted the Sterling family destroyed from the inside out. They wanted William Sterling's empire to crumble under the weight of murder charges and scandal." "Who are your employers, Victoria? Who are you really working for?" Victoria smiled, and it was terrible. "You still don't understand, do you? There are no employers. There's no organized crime syndicate pulling my strings. There's just me, Catherine. Just a woman who spent her entire life watching men like your husband destroy women like you, and who decided to do something about it. The FBI thought they could control me, thought they could use me to catch criminals. Instead, I used them. I used their resources, their cover, their protection to get close to men who deserved to die. Jonathan was number 4, and your father is going to be number 5. The earpiece crackled in Catherine's ear. Detective Mitchell's voice urgent and commanding. "Catherine, say the word. Say it now." But Catherine didn't say the word, because she'd just realized something crucial. Victoria had confessed to murder, but she'd also just admitted there was no criminal organization threatening her father, which meant Detective Mitchell's entire premise was wrong, which meant... Victoria pulled a gun from behind her back, the movement so fast Catherine barely registered it before the barrel was pointed at her chest. "I'm sorry, Catherine. I really am. You deserved better than Jonathan, but you also deserve better than a father who values money over his daughter's safety. And unfortunately, the only way to make William Sterling suffer is to take away the one thing he actually loves. You." The skylight above them exploded in a shower of glass as Detective Mitchell and 3 other officers rappelled down on cables, their weapons trained on Victoria. Mitchell's voice echoed through the warehouse. "Drop the weapon. Drop it now." Victoria didn't drop the weapon. Instead, she turned the gun on herself, pressing the barrel under her chin, her finger on the trigger. "Don't come any closer, or I swear to God I'll do it." Mitchell held up one hand, signaling her team to hold position. "Victoria, don't. Whatever you've done, whatever you're planning, it doesn't have to end this way. Put down the gun and we can talk." "There's nothing to talk about. You heard my confession. You know what I've done. And you know I'm not going to prison to be picked apart by psychiatrists who'll try to explain away my choices as trauma or mental illness. I knew exactly what I was doing. I chose it, and I don't regret any of it." Catherine found her voice, though it came out shaking. "Victoria, you said you did this for women like me, women who were abused. But if you kill yourself if you die here, then everything you did becomes meaningless. The other men you killed, their families never get closure. The women you claim you saved never get to understand what you did for them, and I never get answers about who Jonathan really was and what he was involved in. Please, don't do this." Victoria's hand trembled, the gun wavering slightly. "You want answers? Jonathan was a coward and a thief who got in over his head trying to play criminal mastermind. He borrowed money from actual criminals to fund a real estate scheme that fell apart. When he couldn't pay them back, he stole from your father. When that wasn't enough, he started laundering money for them through fake Sterling Global accounts. He was building a case against William, planning to turn state's evidence and blame everything on your father to save his own skin. I found out about it 3 months ago. That's when I decided he had to die. Not because I was compromised, because I was doing what the FBI wouldn't, protecting you, protecting your father, protecting everyone Jonathan was planning to destroy on his way down." "Then help us prove it. Help us find the evidence that exonerates my father. Victoria, please." The sound of the gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Catherine screamed, her hands flying to her ears, her eyes squeezing shut against the horror of what she knew she was about to see. But when she opened them, Victoria was still standing, the gun now pointed at the floor, her expression one of absolute exhaustion. "I can't help you. The evidence Jonathan compiled against William is hidden somewhere even I couldn't find. Encrypted files, offshore servers, dead drops. He was paranoid and thorough. But I can tell you this, Jonathan had a partner. Someone inside Sterling Global who was helping him build the case against your father. Someone who's still there, still working, still waiting to finish what Jonathan started. And until you find them, Catherine, you and your father will never be safe." Detective Mitchell moved forward slowly, hand extended. "Give me the gun, Victoria. Tell us who the partner is. Let us help you." Victoria looked at Catherine one last time, and in her eyes, Catherine saw something almost like regret. "I don't know who the partner is. Jonathan never told me. He didn't trust me enough, but I know they exist because I saw the communications. Encrypted messages, coded language. Someone inside Sterling Global feeding Jonathan information, helping him build his trap. Find them, Catherine. Find them before they finish what Jonathan started." She handed the gun to Detective Mitchell. Her wrists immediately cuffed her rights. Read in a monotone that felt surreal, given everything that had just transpired. As the officers led her away, Victoria called back over her shoulder, "The attorney David Pacheco. He's not dead. He's in hiding because he knows who the partner is. Find him and you find your answers." The warehouse cleared in a flurry of activity. Catherine was escorted back to the car, her statement taken, her wire removed. Detective Mitchell sat beside her, looking drained. "Well, that didn't go anything like I expected, but at least we've got Victoria in custody and a lead on this mysterious partner." "Do you believe her about doing it to protect me and my father?" Mitchell considers the question. "I think Victoria Castellano is a deeply damaged woman who's convinced herself that murder is justice. Do I think she believed she was helping you? Yes. Do I think that excuses what she did? Absolutely not. But Catherine, she's right about one thing. Until we find out who Jonathan's partner was, this isn't over." Catherine nodded numbly, her mind already racing ahead to the next crisis, the next revelation, the next nightmare waiting to unfold. She'd survived Jonathan. She'd survived Victoria. But somewhere in her father's company, someone was waiting to destroy them both, and Catherine had no idea who or how to stop them. She only knew that the war Victoria had promised was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. William was waiting at the penthouse when Catherine returned, his face ashen, as Marcus briefed him on everything that had transpired in the warehouse. Catherine walked past both men without speaking, went directly to the bar, and poured herself 3 fingers of whiskey, despite the fact that it was barely noon. She downed it in one burning swallow and poured another. "Catherine, you shouldn't be drinking on an empty stomach after everything you've been through." She turned to face her father glass clutched in her hand. "Victoria killed Jonathan. She confessed to murdering my husband, and she claims she did it to protect us, to protect me from him and you from his blackmail scheme. So tell me, Daddy, exactly how much danger are we in? Because apparently Jonathan spent months building a case to frame you for his crimes, and somewhere in your company, someone's still working to finish what he started." William's jaw tightened. "We're going to find Jonathan's partner. I'm bringing in a forensic accounting team, a cybersecurity firm, and private investigators who specialize in corporate espionage. We'll audit every account review, every communication, investigate every employee who had access to the information Jonathan would have needed. Whoever helped him won't stay hidden for long. And while we're searching what they're just going to wait patiently for us to find them, they know Victoria's been arrested. They know she confessed. They're probably destroying evidence right now, or planning to disappear before we can identify them. Marcus cleared his throat. Miss Sterling's right. Whoever the partner is, they're in damage control mode. We need to move fast. I've already started pulling security footage from Sterling Global Headquarters, flagging anyone who stayed late when Jonathan was there, anyone who had unusual access patterns, anyone who... William's phone rang, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife. He answered without looking at the caller ID. Sterling. His face went from pale to gray as he listened. When? How long ago? A pause. Lock down the building. Nobody leaves until security has cleared them. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at Catherine with an expression that made her stomach drop. That was building security. Someone broke into my office at Sterling Global Headquarters. They accessed my private computer, my files, and my safe. Whoever it was knew the security codes, knew the layout, knew exactly what they were looking for. Jonathan's partner. Has to be. They're making their move before we can make ours. Catherine, I need you to stay here with Marcus and the security team. Don't open the door for anyone. Don't... I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. This could be dangerous. If they're desperate enough to break into my office in broad daylight, then they're desperate enough to do anything, which is exactly why I'm not staying here alone waiting for the next catastrophe. We're in this together, Daddy. That's what you said when this started. So let's finish it together. William looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Catherine's expression must have convinced him it would be pointless. Fine, but you stay with me at all times. You don't wander off, you don't investigate anything on your own. Understood? Understood. They took William's car, Marcus driving, while Catherine and her father sat in the back, both of them silent with tension. The Sterling Global building rose 60 stories above Midtown Manhattan, a monument to William's success, and now, potentially, the site of his downfall. They arrived to find police cars already there, uniformed officers, interviewing employees in the lobby while building security, tried to maintain some semblance of normal operations. A detective Catherine didn't recognize approached them immediately. Mr. Sterling, Detective Raymond Chen, NYPD. Your head of security called us about the break-in. We've secured your office but haven't disturbed anything. Wanted you to assess what's missing before we process the scene. William nodded curtly and headed for the executive elevators, Catherine and Marcus close behind. The ride to the 60th floor felt interminable, the silence broken only by the soft ping of each passing level. When the doors opened, they were met by 3 security guards and another man in a suit who Catherine recognized as Thomas Crawford Williams, head of corporate security. Sir, whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They disabled the cameras in this corridor between 2:15 and 2:40 this morning. By the time the system reset and we realized there was a gap in coverage, they were gone. We only discovered the office had been breached when the morning cleaning crew found your door ajar. William's office was in disarray, not ransacked in the way a desperate criminal might tear through a space, but methodically searched with surgical precision. Desk drawers hung open, file cabinets had been emptied, and their contents spread across the floor. The safe behind the Rothko painting stood open, its contents gone. What was in the safe? Detective Chen asked, pulling out a notepad. Personal documents, stock certificates, some cash, and a flash drive containing encrypted backups of sensitive company files. William's voice was carefully controlled, but Catherine could hear the fury underneath. That flash drive is worthless without the encryption key, which is kept in a separate secure location. Unless, Catherine said quietly, the person who took it already has the encryption key. Unless they've had access to your security protocols all along. William turned to Thomas Crawford. Pull the access logs from my office for the past 6 months. I want to know everyone who came in here when I wasn't present. I want to know who had the opportunity to learn my security codes and safe combination. Crawford was already typing on his tablet. Sir, in the past 6 months, only 4 people besides you and your assistant had access. Your attorney, David Pacheco. Your CFO, Robert Martinez. Your head of operations, Jennifer Walsh. And Jonathan Sterling. Catherine felt her heart stop. David Pacheco. Victoria said he was in hiding because he knows who the partner is. What if he's not hiding from the partner? What if he is the partner? William pulled out his phone and dialed. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again with the same result. Thomas, I need David Pacheco's location, now. Home address, cell phone, GPS, credit card activity, everything. Already on it, sir. His cell phone last pinged in the financial district 2 hours ago, but it's been off since then. His home address is on the Upper East Side, but building security says he hasn't been there in 3 days. His credit cards haven't been used since Friday morning. Friday morning, the day after Catherine's interview aired, the day Jonathan was arrested. William's eyes met Catherine's. He ran the moment everything started falling apart, because he knew Victoria's confession would eventually lead us to him. Marcus was scrolling through his own phone. "Sir, I'm pulling up David Pacheco's background. He's been your attorney for how long? 12 years. I hired him right after he made partner at Morrison & Fields. He's handled every major deal Sterling Global has done since then. He's been privy to every confidential piece of information, every strategic decision, every financial maneuver." William's face had gone from gray to white. If David's been working against me, he has everything, every vulnerability, every secret, every piece of leverage anyone would need to destroy this company. Detective Chen looked up from his own phone. "Mr. Sterling, I'm going to need a comprehensive list of everything that was on that flash drive. If this Pacheco has it, and he's gone underground, we need to know what he's planning to do with it." "What he's planning to do is sell it to the highest bidder. Competitors, hostile investors, foreign entities, anyone who'd pay to see Sterling Global collapse." William sat heavily in his desk chair, suddenly looking every one of his years. "And with Jonathan's fabricated evidence showing that I knew about the embezzlement and covered it up, David can position himself as the whistleblower who exposed corruption at the highest levels. He'll be a hero while I go to prison." Catherine felt rage building in her chest, hot and clean and clarifying. "Then we find him first. We find him, and we get that flash drive back, and we destroy every piece of evidence he and Jonathan compiled. Daddy, you built this company from nothing. You've given thousands of people jobs, created billions in shareholder value, contributed millions to charity. We are not letting some corrupt attorney destroy all of that." Thomas Crawford's tablet chimed. "Sir, I've got something. David Pacheco's been paying for a storage unit in Queens under his mother's maiden name. Monthly automatic payments from a bank account that's not connected to any of his primary financials. It's a secure facility climate, controlled the kind of place people keep valuable items they don't want easily traced. That's where he's keeping his insurance policy. Copies of everything, physical backups, probably enough documentation to bury me 10 times over." William stood his moment of weakness past. "Thomas, I want that storage facility surrounded. Hire private security if NYPD can't move fast enough. If David shows up there, I want him detained." "Sir, we can't legally detain him without—" "Detain. I don't care about the legalities right now. I care about stopping a man who's trying to destroy everything I've built. Do whatever you have to do." Detective Chen stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, I understand you're upset, but you need to let us handle this through proper channels. If David Pacheco has committed crimes, we'll arrest him and charge him. But you cannot take the law into your own hands. The law didn't protect my daughter from being beaten in her own home. The law didn't stop Jonathan from stealing millions from my company. The law didn't prevent Victoria from murdering him and trying to frame my family. So forgive me if I'm not particularly interested in waiting for the law to catch up while David Pacheco auctions off my company's secrets to the highest bidder." Catherine put her hand on her father's arm. "Daddy, Detective Chen is right. If we do this wrong, if we break the law trying to stop David, then we're just giving him more ammunition. We do this smart. We do this clean. We find the evidence, we expose him, and we let the system handle the consequences." William looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. You're absolutely right. Thomas work with Detective Chen. Full cooperation. But I want eyes on that storage facility 24/7. The moment David shows up, I want to know about it. Already coordinating with NYPD. We'll have surveillance in place within the hour." Catherine's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, expecting another threatening message from an unknown number, but instead saw a name she recognized. Richard Henley, the investor who'd been at dinner the night Jonathan had beaten her, the one who'd called her father and set the entire chain of events in motion. She answered cautiously. "Mr. Henley." "Miss Sterling, thank God. I've been trying to reach your father all morning, but his phone's been busy. I need to speak with him urgently. It's about David Pacheco." Catherine put the phone on speaker. "You're on speaker with my father and the police. What about David Pacheco?" "He contacted me an hour ago. Wanted to meet to discuss what he called a lucrative investment opportunity. Said he had access to proprietary Sterling Global information that would guarantee substantial returns. Miss Sterling, I think he's trying to sell your father's company secrets, and I think I'm not the first person he's approached." William leaned toward the phone. "Richard, this is William. Did you agree to meet him?" I told him I'd think about it, stalled for time, but he sounded desperate, almost manic, said this was a limited time opportunity that he needed to move quickly before certain information became public. William, I think he knows he's running out of time. Did he say where he's calling from? Give any indication of his location? No, but the call came from a blocked number. However, I heard background noise. Traffic car horns, what sounded like a ferry horn. If I had to guess, I'd say he's somewhere near the waterfront. Detective Chen was already on his radio, coordinating with other units. We're checking all ferry terminals and waterfront areas. If he's planning to run, he might be trying to leave the city by boat. William thanked Richard and hung up. He's going to disappear. Take the flash drive, take whatever physical evidence he's compiled and vanish. We have hours at most before he's gone for good. Marcus had been silent through most of the conversation, but now he spoke up. Sir, there's another possibility. What if David's not running? What if he's meeting with someone? A buyer for the information, a co-conspirator, someone who's been helping him all along. Jonathan was his co-conspirator and Jonathan's dead. But Jonathan had connections, criminal connections that Victoria mentioned. What if David's meeting with those people? What if he's trying to sell them the information Jonathan promised before he died? The implication hung in the air like poison gas. If David was meeting with organized criminals, if he was trying to leverage Jonathan's connections, then this had just escalated from corporate espionage to something far more dangerous. Catherine's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, another text message. But this one made her blood freeze. Catherine Sterling, you and your father have been asking questions about things that don't concern you. Stop now or there will be consequences. This is your only warning. She showed the message to her father and Detective Chen. The detective immediately called for a trace, but they all knew it would come back to a burner phone or a spoofed number. Whoever sent it had done this before. They're threatening you directly now. That's escalation. That means they're getting nervous. William turned to Marcus. I want Catherine in a secure location, not the penthouse, somewhere nobody knows about. A hotel, under a false name, a safe house, something. I'm not hiding while you deal with this. Catherine, these are people who killed Jonathan in police custody. They're not going to hesitate to hurt you if they think it will stop our investigation. Please, let Marcus take you somewhere safe while I handle this. Before Catherine could argue, Thomas Crawford's tablet chimed urgently. Sir, we've got David Pacheco. He just used his credit card at a gas station in Red Hook, Brooklyn, same area where Victoria had her warehouse meeting. Detective Chen was already moving toward the elevator. That's not a coincidence. He's meeting someone there. We need to move now. William grabbed his coat. I'm coming with you. Sir, this is a police operation. You need to let us... That man has my company's future in his hands. I'm not sitting in my office while you decide what happens to it. I'm coming, and you can either take me with you, or I'll follow in my own car. Your choice. Detective Chen looked like he wanted to argue, but pragmatism won out. Fine, but you stay in the car. You don't approach anyone, you don't interfere with the arrest. Agreed? Agreed. Catherine grabbed her father's arm before he could leave. I'm coming too. Catherine, you said we're in this together. You said we finish it together. I'm coming. They made it to Red Hook in 27 minutes, Marcus driving with the kind of aggressive precision that suggested former military training. 3 unmarked police cars had already established a perimeter around a run-down warehouse near the waterfront, the same industrial desolation that seemed to breed criminal activity in forgotten corners of the city. Detective Chen coordinated with his team via radio, his voice calm and professional. Suspect vehicle is a black Mercedes, registered to David Pacheco, parked on the north side of the building. Heat signatures show 2 people inside the warehouse, one near the entrance, one deeper in the structure. Approach with caution. Suspect may be armed and is considered dangerous. William sat rigid in the back seat, his hands clenched into fists. Catherine reached over and took one of his hands, squeezing gently. He squeezed back, and in that moment, she felt the full weight of what they'd been through together. The abuse, the violence, the betrayal, the murder, the conspiracy. All of it leading to this moment in a car outside a warehouse where her father's legacy would either be saved or destroyed forever. The police moved in with tactical precision. Catherine watched through the car window as officers in tactical gear approached the warehouse from multiple angles. Detective Chen's radio crackled with updates. Front entrance secured. Moving to interior. Contact, we have visual on suspect. Then the gunshot. The sound cracked through the air and Catherine felt her father flinch beside her. Marcus swore and reached for his own weapon. The radio exploded with voices shouting over each other. "Officer down. Suspect is armed. Fall back. Get medical in here now." "Stay in the car," Marcus ordered, already opening his door. "Do not get out. No matter what happens, you stay here." He was gone before either of them could respond. William tried the door, but Marcus had engaged the locks from outside. They were trapped helpless while chaos unfolded 50 yards away. Catherine could see officers taking cover behind vehicles, could see movement in the warehouse windows, could see the flashing lights of an ambulance arriving with sirens wailing. "This is my fault," William said, his voice hollow. "I trusted David. I gave him access to everything. I let him into my company, into my life, and he used all of it to destroy me. This is Jonathan's fault. This is David's fault. This is the fault of every person who chose greed and betrayal over integrity. But it is not your fault, Daddy. You did what you thought was right. You tried to handle Jonathan's embezzlement quietly to protect the company and your employees. You can't blame yourself for not anticipating that your own attorney would be conspiring against you." Another gunshot, then 3 more in rapid succession. Catherine's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst. She couldn't see what was happening, couldn't hear the radio chatter, could only wait and pray that nobody else died because of the nightmare her marriage had become. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Detective Chen appeared at the car window. Marcus unlocked the doors and Chen slid into the front seat, his face grim. "We've got David Pacheco in custody. He fired on officers when they tried to arrest him. Nobody was seriously hurt, thank God. He's being transported to central booking now." "What about the flash drive? What about the evidence he stole?" "We recovered a laptop bag from the scene. It's being processed now, but preliminary inspection suggests it contains what you're looking for. Mr. Sterling, we're going to need to go through proper channels to return your property, but I can tell you that whatever David was planning to do with that information, he won't get the chance now." William closed his eyes, relief washing over his features. Who was the other person in the warehouse? Who was David meeting? Chen's expression darkened. "That's where it gets complicated. The other person claims she's FBI, says she was conducting an undercover investigation into David Pacheco and Jonathan Sterling's criminal activities, says she's been working this case for 8 months. Catherine felt cold dread settle in her stomach. "Who is she? What's her name?" "Agent Sarah Morrison. And before you ask, yes, we've verified her credentials. She's legitimate, which means the FBI has known about Jonathan and David's operation for 8 months and didn't tell anyone. Didn't warn, you didn't warn Sterling. Global didn't prevent any of the violence or the murder or the attempted corporate espionage. They just watched it all unfold." William's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "They used my daughter's abuse as cover for their investigation. They let Jonathan beat Catherine, let Victoria infiltrate our lives, let David steal company secrets, all so they could build a case against organized crime figures who were using Jonathan's schemes to launder money. Am I understanding that correctly?" "That appears to be the situation, yes. Agent Morrison is claiming that intervening earlier would have compromised the larger investigation. She's claiming that everything that happened was regrettable but necessary to take down a major criminal network." Catherine felt something break inside her, not the same breaking she'd felt when Jonathan had beaten her. This was different. This was the breaking of whatever last shred of faith she'd had in institutions, in systems, in the idea that someone was looking out for victims of violence. The FBI had known. They'd known, and they'd watched, and they'd done nothing because her suffering was acceptable collateral damage in their bigger case. "I want to see her. I want to look her in the eye and hear her explain how my husband beating me with a belt was regrettable but necessary." Detective Chen looked uncomfortable. "Miss Sterling, I don't think that's a good idea right now. Emotions are running high, and I don't care about your comfort level, Detective. I want to see the woman who thought my abuse was an acceptable price to pay for her career advancement. Now." Chen looked at William, who nodded once. "My daughter wants answers. She deserves answers. Take us to Agent Morrison." They were escorted into the warehouse past evidence markers and forensic technicians to a makeshift interrogation area where a woman in her 40s sat at a folding table, her FBI credentials on display, her expression professional and utterly devoid of empathy. She stood when Catherine and William entered, hand extended, as if this were a normal business meeting. "Mr. Sterling. Miss Sterling, I'm Special Agent Sarah Morrison. I understand you have questions about the investigation." Catherine ignored the offered handshake. "You knew Jonathan was abusing me. You had Victoria embedded in my life, filming me watching it happen. And you did nothing." Miss Sterling, I understand you're upset. I'm not upset. I'm enraged. I'm disgusted. I'm standing here looking at a federal agent who watched a woman be beaten and did absolutely nothing because it was inconvenient for her case. Agent Morrison's expression remained neutral. Victoria Castellano was not authorized to film your assault. She went rogue. That video was never supposed to exist. When we found out about it, we were already planning to extract her from the operation. But you knew Jonathan was violent. You knew he was dangerous. And you left me there with him anyway, because prosecuting money laundering charges was more important than protecting a domestic violence victim. Miss Sterling, if we had intervened earlier, we would have alerted the criminal network that we were investigating. They would have scattered, destroyed evidence, and disappeared. We'd have lost years of work and dozens of potential indictments. I'm sorry you were hurt, truly, but the greater good sometimes requires difficult choices. Catherine felt her father's hand on her shoulder, grounding her before she could physically attack the agent. William's voice was cold as winter. Agent Morrison, I'm going to make sure every media outlet in the country knows that the FBI knowingly allowed my daughter to be abused to protect their investigation. I'm going to make sure your name becomes synonymous with institutional failure and moral bankruptcy. And then I'm going to sue the federal government for every dollar they've got for their negligence in protecting a domestic violence victim. When I'm done, the only job you'll be qualified for is security guard at a shopping mall. Agent Morrison's professional mask slipped slightly. Mr. Sterling threatening a federal agent is not a threat, a promise. You chose your career over my daughter's safety. Now I'm going to end that career. Seems like a fair trade to me. They left before Morrison could respond, Catherine shaking with adrenaline and rage, William guiding her back to the car with protective intensity. Detective Chen followed them out, looking like he wanted to apologize for the entire federal justice system. For what it's worth, I think what the FBI did was unconscionable. I've already filed a complaint with the Inspector General's office. It won't undo what happened to you, Miss Sterling, but maybe it will prevent them from using someone else's suffering as a tactical advantage. Catherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They drove back to Manhattan in silence, the weight of everything that had transpired pressing down like a physical force. David Pacheco in custody, the flash drive recovered, Agent Morrison exposed, Victoria awaiting trial, Jonathan dead, the conspiracy unraveled, and yet Catherine felt no sense of victory, no satisfaction in having survived. She just felt exhausted. Back at the penthouse, William poured them both drinks, and they sat in the living room watching the sun set over the city. Maria appeared with food. Neither of them wanted, but both ate anyway because she insisted. The television played the news on mute, showing footage of David Pacheco being led from the warehouse in handcuffs, headlines screaming about corporate conspiracy and FBI corruption. It's over, William said finally. It's really over. Is it David and Victoria will go to trial? There will be months of depositions and testimony and reliving every horrible moment. The FBI investigation will become public. Our family's name will be dragged through the media. Sterling Global's reputation will be damaged. This isn't over, Daddy. This is just a different kind of nightmare. But you're safe. That's all that matters to me. You're safe, and you're free, and you never have to be afraid of Jonathan again. Everything else we can survive. The media, the trials, the scrutiny. We'll survive it together. Catherine thought about that word, survive. It was what she'd been doing for 6 years. Surviving Jonathan's abuse, surviving his control, surviving each day in a marriage that was slowly killing her. But she didn't want to just survive anymore. She wanted to live. She wanted to reclaim the woman she'd been before Jonathan had broken her. She wanted to become someone new, someone stronger, someone who turned pain into purpose. Daddy, I meant what I said in the interview about the Sterling Foundation. I want to build something that helps other women escape the kind of situation I was in. I want to use everything I learned, all the resources we have, to make sure no woman ever feels as trapped and hopeless as I felt. William smiled, and it was genuine warmth for the first time in days. Then that's what we'll do. We'll build a foundation that actually makes a difference. And Catherine, I want you to run it. Not as a figurehead, not as a wealthy socialite dabbling in charity work. I want you to run it the way you'd run a company, with vision and strategy and the determination to change the world. What about Sterling Global? Don't you need me there? Sterling Global has plenty of executives who can handle day-to-day operations. What it doesn't have is a Sterling who's willing to fight for people who have no voice and no power. That's you, Catherine. That's who you've always been, even when Jonathan tried to convince you otherwise. You're a fighter, so fight for something that matters. Catherine felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness or trauma. They were tears of relief and possibility, and the first fragile stirrings of hope. She'd survived the nightmare. She'd exposed the conspiracy. She'd watched her abuser face consequences, even if those consequences came in a form she'd never expected. And now she had the chance to transform her suffering into something meaningful, something that would help others avoid the hell she'd endured. 3 months later, Catherine stood in front of a room full of journalists and philanthropists and domestic violence advocates, announcing the official launch of the Sterling Foundation. The space was bright and modern, deliberately designed to feel nothing like a victim support center and everything like a place of strength and empowerment. Behind her stood her father, Maria Detective Mitchell, and 3 women who'd been among the Foundation's first clients. Women who'd escaped abusive situations with the Foundation's legal and financial support. "The Sterling Foundation exists because I survived," Catherine said, her voice steady and clear. "I survived because I had resources most women don't have. I had a father with money and power. I had access to the best attorneys and the best security. But I also survived because one man, Richard Henley, made a phone call when he saw something wrong. Because Detective Sarah Mitchell believed my story and fought for justice. Because even in the darkest moments, there were people who refused to look away." She paused, looking out at the crowd, seeing reporters taking notes, seeing advocates nodding in recognition, seeing her father's proud smile. No woman should need a billionaire father to escape domestic violence. No woman should have to wait until her husband is arrested or dead to be free. The Sterling Foundation is committed to providing every resource I had access to for women who need it most. Legal representation, emergency housing, financial support, security, therapy, job placement, college scholarships, whatever it takes to help a woman leave and build a new life on her terms. The applause was thunderous, but Catherine barely heard it. She was thinking about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, broken and bleeding on her own floor, convinced she would never escape. She was thinking about Victoria awaiting trial in a federal prison, her crusade for justice twisted into murder. She was thinking about Jonathan dead from a poison meant to look like justice, but was really just revenge. She was thinking about David Pacheco, facing decades in prison for corporate espionage and attempted theft. She was thinking about Agent Morrison, quietly reassigned after the FBI's internal investigation, concluded she'd exercised poor judgment in allowing Catherine's abuse to continue unmonitored. But mostly she was thinking about the future, about the women she would help, about the lives she would change, about the power that came not from money or connections, but from surviving hell and choosing to make sure others didn't have to endure the same flames. She'd been Catherine Vance, the dutiful wife. She'd been Catherine Sterling, the abuse victim. Now she was simply Catherine, the woman who'd reclaimed her voice and her power and her purpose. And she was never going to be silenced again. The nightmare had ended, but the real work was just beginning, and Catherine was finally truly ready to fight.